6 major championships, one of the most popular players to ever pick up a club. In 2026, he played just one official tournament. February, Saudi International. Then, nothing. No Masters, no PGA, no US Open, no Open Championship. For the first time in 30 years, Phil Mickelson completely disappeared from the game he helped define. His team gave a reason: family health issues. Clean, simple, respectable. But something about that explanation never sat right with the people who know golf best. Because while Phil went quiet, a different story started to surface. Whispers from inside locker rooms, murmurs from people who work behind the scenes. Well, not fans, not trolls, people who actually know what goes on when the cameras stop rolling. They said the family health explanation was not the full picture. They said there was another reason Phil stopped showing up, and they said that reason was big enough to end a career. Think about what Phil Mickelson meant to golf. He was not just a winner, he was a showman. The guy who played left-handed with a smile. The guy who gambled on risky shots and somehow pulled them off. He made golf fun for people who did not even play. That is rare. That is special. And that is why this story hurts so much. Because the man who gave us so many great moments is now the man who cannot face the cameras. One day he is the people's champion. The next, he is a ghost. And ghosts do not give interviews. Here is what makes this strange. Phil Mickelson has never been quiet about anything. He gave interviews about gambling, about Saudi money, about his feud with the PGA Tour. He said things other players would never dare to say. That was his brand. That was who he was. Then suddenly, nothing. A man who talked too much became a man who would not talk at all. In your view, is family health the real reason or just a cover? Drop your ruling in the comments. Hit subscribe. The real story has nothing to do with doctors. So why would a player who built his entire public identity on being outspoken suddenly shut down completely? People do not change that way overnight. Not without a reason. Not without something pushing them into silence. And the people who work inside professional golf, the ones who hear things that never make it to television, they have been talking about that reason for months. They just would not say it out loud. Until now. A journalist who has covered the sport for over 20 years decided to dig deeper. He talked to people who were actually there. He collected statements. He found a pattern that no one had connected before. And what he found made him believe that Phil's silence was not a choice. It was a strategy. But a strategy for what? That is the question everyone is asking. The journalist is Alan Shipnuck. You might know his name. He wrote the book on Phil, not the authorized one, the real one. He has sources that go deeper than any TV reporter. Shipnuck has spent decades building trust with people inside the game. Caddies, coaches, former players, people who see things that never make it to the broadcast. They talk to him because they know he will not burn them. And when he started asking questions about why Phil had vanished, he did not get a simple answer. He got 19 separate confirmations. 19 people who told him the same thing from different angles. Not gossip, not guesses. People who were in the room. People who saw something. They had no reason to lie. Now here is the part where you have to lean in. Shipnuck's investigation pointed towards something that had been hiding in plain sight. Something that involved places where Phil used to belong. Places that quietly stopped welcoming him. No announcement. No statement. Just a door that closed and never opened again. That is the first crack in the wall. And once that crack appeared, the rest of the wall started crumbling. When Shipnuck publishes something, the players read it. The executives read it. The agents read it. Because they know he does not guess. He verifies. He cross-checks. He waits until he has enough to be certain. That is why 19 sources trusted him. They knew he would not burn them. They knew he would get it right. He did. But those places are only the beginning. Because what Shipnuck uncovered next went far beyond membership disputes. It went into territory that no golfer wants to see their name attached to. Territory that explains exactly why Phil's lawyers told him to stop talking and never look back. Here is the thing about silence. When you are innocent, you speak. When you have a good explanation, you give it. When you have nothing to hide, you say so. Phil Mickelson did none of those things. He just disappeared. The reason is not what his team told the press. Before we get to the specifics, you need to understand the stakes. Phil Mickelson was not just any player. He was a legend, a future Hall of Famer, a guy who won a major at age 50. He had everything: fame, money, respect, and he threw it all away. Not because of one bad decision, because of a pattern that had been building for years. A pattern that people inside the game had noticed but were too afraid to talk about, until Shipnuck gave them a voice. 19 people is not a rumor. It is not a whisper. It is a chorus. 19 people from different places, different roles, different relationships to Phil. Some were club employees, some were fellow members, some were friends, some were former allies. They all told the same story, not identical but consistent. A pattern emerged. A pattern that Shipnuck could not ignore, and a pattern that Phil's team could not explain away. When 19 people say the same thing, you listen, even if you do not want to believe it. Think about what it means when a player of that stature suddenly becomes invisible. Sponsors disappear, endorsements dry up, invitations stop coming. The golf world moves on without you, and the people who used to cheer for you start to wonder what you did. That is where Phil is now. He is not injured. He is not retired. He is in exile. Exile is a choice. Now let's talk about the timeline. Phil's disappearance did not happen overnight. It started with small things. A missed appearance here, a canceled interview there. Then the gaps got bigger. By the middle of 2026, he was gone completely. No one knew where he was. No one knew when he would come back. His team said he was dealing with family health issues. But the people who knew him best said something else. They said Phil was running from something that had finally caught up with him. Consider the timing. Phil won the PGA Championship in 2021 at age 50. That was his crowning moment. The oldest major winner in history. Everyone celebrated. But behind the scenes, something was already wrong. Sources say the behavior that would later get him ejected from clubs started before that victory. It was happening while he was still winning, while he was still smiling for the cameras. The public Phil and the private Phil were not the same person. And the private Phil was making choices that would eventually destroy everything. To understand what that something is, you have to look at the places where Phil used to belong. Private clubs, exclusive courses, the kind of places where members pay millions just to walk through the door. Phil was a member at several of these clubs. He had been for years. Then, quietly, he stopped being a member. No explanation, no announcement, just a silent removal. And at one of those clubs, the removal was not silent at all. Sources say that at one club in Southern California, Phil was approached on the course during a round. Club officials walked up to him in the middle of play and told him he had to leave. Not after the round, not at the end of the day. Right there, on the fairway, in front of other members. That is not a polite resignation. That is an ejection. And ejections do not happen without a reason. A serious reason. What could possibly justify that kind of treatment? Phil's lawyers have not said. The club has not said. But Shipnuck's sources have. They say it was not about money. It was not about slow play. It was about behavior. Behavior that the club found unacceptable. Behavior that they did not want to tolerate. That is the first piece of the puzzle. But it is not the biggest piece. Because Shipnuck's investigation went even deeper. He found that Phil's problems were not just with clubs. They were with people. Specifically, with a fellow player's wife. Here is where it gets personal. According to multiple sources, Phil was at a dinner with a group of people. Among them was Ashley Perez. She is the wife of Pat Perez, a golfer who played on both the PGA Tour and LIV. At some point during the dinner, Phil and Ashley ended up alone. And that is when, sources claim, Phil took out his phone. He showed her a photo of himself, a photo of a very explicit nature. Then he invited her to his hotel room later that night. Let that sink in. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a misread signal. This is a specific allegation involving a specific person at a specific time. And if it is true, it changes everything we thought we knew about Phil Mickelson. Phil's response was telling. He did not deny showing a photo. Instead, he said the photo was not a full-body nude. It was just a picture of his upper body. That is not a denial. That is a clarification of degree. He admitted the photo existed. He admitted he showed it to her. His only defense was that it was not as graphic as people were saying. That is not the response of an innocent man. He also admitted that he apologized. To Pat Perez. To Ashley Perez. He said the apology was not accepted. Think about that. If you had done nothing wrong, would you apologize? Would you apologize to both people involved? Would you admit that the apology was rejected? No. You would deny everything and move on. But Phil did not do that. He acknowledged that he did something that required an apology. That is a massive red flag. Now you might be wondering why this is only coming out now. Why did it take until 2026 for this story to break? The answer is simple. People were afraid to talk. Phil Mickelson was one of the most powerful figures in golf. He had connections everywhere. He had lawyers. He had money. Speaking out against him meant risking your career, your reputation, your livelihood. It took someone with the credibility of Alan Shipnuck and the willingness of 19 sources to finally bring this into the open. And even then, the response from the golf establishment has been cautious, defensive, reluctant to engage. But the dam has broken. The golf world is a small community. Players know each other. Caddies talk, wives talk, coaches talk, news travels fast. And when something happens, everyone hears about it. That is why the whispers about Phil have been circulating for years. Long before Shipnuck wrote his report, long before the clubs took action, people knew. They just did not say anything out loud. Because Phil was untouchable. He was too big, too powerful, too beloved, until he was not. Now the silence is deafening. Let's compare Phil to other LIV players. Brooks Koepka went to LIV. Bryson DeChambeau went to LIV. They both faced criticism. They both lost some fans. But they can still come back. They can still play in majors. They can still sign endorsement deals. Phil cannot. Why? Because his problems are not just about the tour war. His problems are about behavior, allegations, things that sponsors cannot ignore. That is the difference. Phil burned bridges that cannot be rebuilt. He knows it. So where does that leave us? Phil Mickelson has not spoken publicly about any of this. He has not addressed the clubs. He has not addressed the allegations. He has not given a single interview. His team says he is dealing with family health issues, but the people who know the truth say something else. They say Phil is hiding, not because he is sick, because he is scared. Scared of what will come out if he opens his mouth. Here is the cruel irony. By staying silent, Phil is only making things worse. Every day that he refuses to speak, the rumors grow louder. The speculation gets wilder. The public assumes he is guilty. If he were innocent, he would be shouting from the rooftops. He would be on every show. He would be telling his side of the story. But he is not. He is hiding. That tells you everything you need to know. Think about what this means for his legacy. Phil Mickelson was once the most beloved player on tour. Fans cheered his every shot. They celebrated his victories. They forgave his mistakes. But this is different. This is not a bad shot or a bad decision. This is a pattern of behavior that has been hidden for years, and now that it is out in the open, there is no going back. The golf world is watching. The fans are watching. The media is watching. And everyone is waiting for Phil to say something. Anything. But he is not going to, because he cannot. Because if he speaks, he risks everything. His reputation, his freedom, his future. So he stays quiet. His silence is his confession. What happens next is uncertain. The USGA has not commented. The PGA Tour has not commented. Everyone is waiting to see which way the wind blows. But the fans are not waiting. They are already forming their opinions. They are already choosing sides. And they are already demanding answers that may never come. There is also the legal side to consider. If these allegations are proven, Phil could face more than just public shame. There could be lawsuits. There could be criminal charges. There could be permanent bans from every tour. That is why his lawyers are so aggressive. That is why they threaten to sue anyone who repeats the allegations. They are not defending his reputation. They are defending his freedom. That is a losing battle. What does this mean for the future of golf? The sport is already divided. The PGA Tour and LIV are at war. Players are choosing sides. Fans are picking teams. And now this scandal adds another layer of chaos. If Phil is guilty, golf loses one of its biggest names. If he is innocent, golf still loses, because the damage is already done. Either way, the sport suffers. Trust erodes. Sponsors get nervous. Viewers turn away. That is the real cost of this story. It is not just about Phil Mickelson. It is about the integrity of the game itself. That is not something you can fix with a press release. Because here is the hard truth. Even if Phil Mickelson never speaks again, the damage is done. His legacy is tarnished. His reputation is ruined. The man who was once the most beloved player on tour is now a cautionary tale. A reminder that fame and money do not protect you from the truth. That silence, in the end, is its own kind of confession. Now it is your turn. You have heard the story. You know the allegations. You know Phil's response. You know what the sources are saying. The question is simple. Do you believe Phil Mickelson is innocent, or do you believe the 19 sources who say otherwise? Do you think he is protecting his family, or is he protecting himself? Do you think he will ever speak, or will he stay silent forever? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me what you really think. Hit subscribe, because this story is far from over. The fallout from this is just beginning. There are more sources, more details, more twists, and the golf world may never be the same again. The next chapter of this story is going to be even more explosive, and you are not going to want to miss it.